Viewer discretion is advised.
Walt Disney had to start somewhere. Stan Lee had to start somewhere. George Lucas had to start somewhere. Why can't I start in New Zealand in a garage?
Mandate.
Welcome to Mandate, where we navigate fresh perspectives and nothing's off the table. Tonight's guest hails all the way from West Tamaki Makaurau. He is the CEO and the founder of Freshman's crew, dance crew, but also he is a radio host, MC, musician. He's the regional manager of Zeal out in West, and also who do a lot of good work with our rangatahi. Also, he's also, I guess you could say, businessman, entrepreneur, kind of.
Yeah, I guess so.
Entrepreneur, businessman, and also back in the days, amazing dance crew called SAS Sweet and Sour, who were world hip hop champs. Please give it up for the incredibly talented Hadleigh Pouesi.
Thank you, brother. It's great to be here, man.
Maro lava also, hey, good to see you. It's been a while, Heads.
Been a long time, bro.
Been a long time, and I know you do some amazing work right now, and for ages. And so, just if you could just I don't know, I guess just give us a bit of insight of what you've been up to lately, because I know you're doing some amazing stuff in terms of this new musical coming out called Pacifica.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I guess for those who don't know me, I kind of consider myself a professional juggler. You know, I do a whole lot of different things, and on one side, my community arm, like you said, you know, working out West Auckland and running a youth centre out there. In my creative space, it's more around dancing and choreography, and now getting into musicals and shows, and just a whole lot of different things. I just don't. I get bored quite easy, so I try and fill my time and space with things that are productive.
Oh, awesome! We can just touch base a little bit earlier before the whole thing with SAS and all that kind of stuff, and all the amazing work you've done and accomplished. And so, what were you like? Because I want to know. I don't think I've asked you, Hads, what were you like back in the younger days?
Oh, in the younger days, you know,
the wonder years.
Yeah. Well, I actually, you know, my work with Sweet and Sour was kind of the thing that put me into somewhat of a public space, and before that, I was a league player, and so it was rugby league was kind of my thing, and going through school, I went to school to play league, and I tried to stay in school so I could keep playing league, and it wasn't until my last year in high school that I was introduced to dance, and so. Before Sweet and Sour and before all of that, it was all about sports, and it was It was an interesting kind of space growing up. I think I was quite an introvert, and I still am a bit of an introvert. But back then, it took time for me to kind of understand how to use social skills. And so, kind of growing up, I was the awkward heads who just like playing rugby league.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you would never think that, because you're quite I guess you're quite opinionated, you're quite vocal as well. Heads. And so, and it seems like there's some sort of mana leadership qualities about you also. And so, was it, like you were saying, you were quite awkward kind of growing up? Was that always something that was installed or embedded in you, or was it something that kind of you had as a process in terms of learning to be some sort of leader?
Yeah, I felt like there's been some key times that I've had to unlock different things, you know, and I stand here today understanding that I've got a mentor of leadership, you know, and that I'm good when I'm in spaces of leadership. But it's been a skill that has been tested and crafted over time. It's definitely not something that I was born with. Like I said, like I'm naturally kind of a little bit more introverted. I keep my circle really, really close. And if it was up to me, I'd be sitting at home watching TV and not talking to anybody. But I understand how to utilize the skills of talking and being able to muster people together. And that's kind of what has led me into a space of leadership.
Mean.
And it's so interesting coming, you know, you mentioned the focus on rugby league and then shifting to dance, which seem like completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'm curious about, what was it about dance? Was there sort of some seeds that were planted early in life that sort of made you think, Oh, actually, I can pick this up really quickly. Or was it sort of a natural talent thing? Or what?
Definitely not a natural talent thing. Definitely, I'm not a natural dancer. There's two kind of spaces that stand out as pivotal moments for me. When I was really young, man, this is showing my age, but there used to be this festival called Parachute Festival, and it was like the gospel festival. You know, it was the gospel festival that happened once a year, and my first parachute festival was at Matamata, which is really showing my age. Only a certain generation will remember parachute from Matamata. But I was lucky enough at 13. I went to my first parachute, and it was like my first music festival. Really, it was kind of like my first time away from my parents, first time out of Auckland, and I found myself like not really knowing where I was. I went down with my church, but it was a Palangi church, and parachute is predominantly a Palangi festival, really. And I was like, man, I want to find my people. I want to find where are the Brown brothers at? And then hidden away in the corner, there was a stage called the Massive Stage, and the Massive Stage is where all the islanders were. That's where all the hip hop and R&B gospel artists were. And so I found my way there, and I sat down, and it kind of just introduced me to this whole world of performing arts and Pacific performing arts, you know, and there were people like, I remember La'au or Sticks or Lanswell, as he goes by now. He was the MC, and I was like astonished, like, wow, this guy's amazing. And that kind of set the seeds of me wanting to be a host for different shows. And then I saw Gyra. And Gyra, for, again, showing my age, but Gyra was the first New Zealand street dance team, but they did street dance, hip-hop dance, break dance, but also were amazing singers. Vince Harder was in there, like all of my heroes. And I remember looking up on stage, especially at Vince, and seeing how great he was at singing, and then he was able to flip, and I was like, there's someone like me who can do all of this. And it really instilled a bit of a fire inside of me, like, if they can do it, I can do it. And then get back to Auckland, you get back to reality, get back to rugby league, you forget about that. And then in my last year of high school, they announced that there was going to be like auditions for the dance team, and I'm sitting there with the first 13, and oh, bro, you can't audition. No, you can't audition. And my competition mind, bro, I can audition, I can do that, that's easy. And so that took me into a space just as kind of a dare. Go and audition, got through. Oh, this is pretty cool. Then I remember about when I was 13 years old, and oh, that's what these guys were doing. And man, maybe I could be like a Vince Harder, or I could be like all of these people that I really looked up to. And that's what set me on the pathway to dance. Wow. That was such a long story. Sorry.
No, okay. So I always wanted to ask you, man, like, how did you start it? How did you start Obsessed?
Yeah.
Like,
so Sweet and Sour, for those who remember Sweet and Sour, there is a generation that still holds Sweet and Sour close to heart. The real story is that there were two guys, David and Fender. They were the youngest members of Sweet and Sour. The story goes that they were sitting in their business studies class, and they were trying to pass the time, and they said, if you could make a dream team of like the best dance crew from everybody at Kelston Boys, because I went to Kelston Boys, we all went to Kelston Boys, who would be like the top 8? And they wrote down on there, like, you know, you just do this when you don't want to listen to the teacher. They wrote down a list of the top 8, and then that list was like, man, maybe we should ask their top 8 if they want to be in a dance crew. And so back then it was Bebo. You get the message, bro, do you want to be in a dance crew? I'm like, yeah, I want to be in a dance crew. Like, I'm at that time I had finished high school. I don't want to be in a dance crew. I'm living my life, you know. And as someone who I see as a big role model, I kind of went to them and said, bro, these guys, they told me to be in a dance crew, laughing about it. And he goes, oh, bro, I think you should do it. And it's probably from that kind of someone that I really looked up to, kind of going like, man, I think you should do it. This could be really cool, you know. And so I entertained it, went to the first rehearsal, which was at Fender, the guy who made the list. It was at his house. Went to the first rehearsal, and it was just a bunch of boys sitting around playing PlayStation, really. There was no dancing. It was just like us kind of chilling out. And then the mum came home, Fender's mum came home with a tray of Sweet and Sour. Oh, I thought you boys were practicing. You guys just want me to get you food. And so, we eat the food and then, no, we'll do a rehearsal tomorrow. Same thing happens. She comes in with her tray of sweet and sour. Oh, man, you guys aren't even a dance crew. You're not even training. You just want the food. So much so that it just became that our name was Sweet and Sour because that's what we ate after every rehearsal.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really by luck. We didn't, at that time, number one, boys didn't really dance. Number two, there was no platforms to dance. At that time, there was no national championships. There was no world championships. We just loved You Got Served. And there was a dance competition at school that everybody kind of got involved with. But outside of that, there was no pathways. There was no platforms. So we were just kind of lucking our way through.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man. That's crazy because it seems like you really, pretty much you guys pioneered the way in terms of changing the game.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. There was a crew before us, and I got to give credit where credit is due. Desire are the originals, and so Desire are the ones that actually, they're the ones that opened the pathway. They are from Otara, and they got themselves over to LA to the World Championships, and I think the first year they went, they came 8th. Then they went back a second time, and they came 2nd. And that, New Zealand, we're a competitive bunch, but also when there's a goal and when Desire comes back with a silver medal, if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah.
And then as a country, we've been going back for, I reckon, close to 15 years now. That's what has started my career. It's what then catapulted Paris's career and so on and so forth.
If you could turn back time, Hats, did you ever, like, in your wildest imagination, did you ever, man, this is going to blow up?
Never.
It's going to lead me to all these other avenues.
Never, especially in dance. So after school, when my rugby league career dried up really quickly.
Well, who were you playing for at the time?
Oh, Glenora.
Yeah,
and then after school, we got kind of shoulder tapped to do some stuff in Oz, but it wasn't. I've learned really quickly it wasn't the life for me. But I wanted to be a singer, so music has been a big thing in my family. My grandfather was a composer, and so I wanted to get into music, and so this dance thing was like, oh, I don't want to be a dancer. I'm going to be a singer. You guys are going to dance for me. Those kinds of things. And then once I started doing it, I just fell in love with it. It was because it's artistic. You can still have your real creative freedom, but it was physical. And so what I loved about being a rugby league player, I could then apply in art. Yeah.
Mean.
Man, that's crazy. One of the classic things about that year when you guys went to Worlds was the mix that you guys danced to. I heard that you pieced that all together.
Yeah. So my whole thing really is dance mixes. I've always loved. I used to. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place.
No, all good, man.
When I was little, but I'm just exposing my age time and time again. When I was little, I loved hearing remixes, but I didn't know how to make them. And so I'd have like this tape recorder, and you would tape the radio. You would hope that the DJ didn't like talk over the beginning of the song or my FM, and you'd have to kind of edit it out. And so I would try and make these mixtapes, but make it sound like a DJ was doing it. And my trademark was, there was a City High song. What would you do if your son was at home? And then at the end of it, it goes like, hold up. And then it goes into like this remix. So I would always like hold up and change and then bring in another song. Bro, I thought I was the mean DJ. But that little, I guess, experience opened my world into music mixing. And so mixing for dance crews, being able to mix for artists and their live shows, being able to do some mixing for television. I love anything kind of creative around that space too.
Wow. Man. And now you've started the freshman dance crew. And so how's that get with all these youngins coming in and all this new talent that's coming in? Yeah,
it's been, it seems like it's new, but we're actually celebrating our 10th year this year.
Wow, 10 years.
Yeah, so I think when Sweet and Sour wrapped up, we won the World Championships, which was amazing. But for me anyway, I stood on that podium and I was like, now what? Like, we've achieved our lifetime goal. We've achieved it in a year. We won the gold medal 1 year after starting. And so I was like, there must be more, or do we just retire? We did a couple of tours and we went around the world, went to Africa, went to back and forth to LA, and it was fun, but it wasn't paying the bills. And so when Sweet and Sour wrapped up, I thought, okay, my dancing days are over. But then I saw other dancers go in that cycle as well, that they go to the world championships, they either win or they don't win, they retire at like 20. I'm like, bro, there has to be more. There has to be more to life in dancing than just going to this space. And so I thought, oh, well, what if I've been there, I've done that. Maybe I can mentor or find a new path. And so Fresh started as a way to get young people through the normal route, but then extend onto that route and try and unlock careers as dancers. And Paris has done this. Paris Goebel has done this at an amazing level. But there just wasn't enough opportunities there. And I looked over to the contemporary dance scene, and there's in the contemporary dance scene, you could actually be a dancer full-time. That could be your job. And I'm like, how come we can't do that for hip-hop? And so it's taken 10 years, but now we're employing dancers just to be in the crew. Their job is to come to rehearsal. Their job is to go and do gigs. Their job is to travel around the world. Their job is to do what they love. And so that was the whole kind of, let's start fresh to create a fresh pathway for young dancers so they can reap the fruit that we were never able, they're able to reap the fruit from the seeds that we were sowing ages ago. And so our vision statement for Fresh is to be a home for artists and a waka for stories. So there's two kind of things in that we want to make sure that artists feel it's not just them building into us, but us building into them, that there's a two-way relationship there, and that we can tell our Pacific stories to the world. We've been able to create the home, and I think over the next couple of years, we really want to get our stories out to the world.
Wow, that's crazy. It's so crazy. I love the fact you are telling the stories, because you know some people just kind of get up and they just do a dance and a routine. It's like, oh, that's nice. But I love the fact that every dance the routine that you guys get together and do is actual story, a backdrop of what's happening here and Pacific stories. And so, why the Pacific stories? Is it just something that you just like, because we're Pacific, let's just do it?
Yeah, I think it's something that I learned with Sweet and Sour. So when we went over. For our first time at the World Championships, they thought we were a rugby team, because I'm a bit of a big guy. I don't fit the mold of a dancer, and all of our guys are the same size. And so we're walking through and all blacks, taking photos with us, and then we go up and we can dance. And we realized that we've got something really different that the rest of the world don't have, but the rest of the world want. And to have something from this little island at the bottom of the world, and then be able to go to LA and do stuff, and go over to Africa and do stuff, go to Australia and do stuff, and that there's an audience there, we realize that they're not getting us because we're good, they're getting us because we have something that nowhere else has. Paris, again, I keep saying her name, but Paris Goebel has realized that and has taken it to a whole nother level. But that's kind of, that's what has kind of shaped what we do. Wow. We know that as Pacific people, we've got a story to tell. I think that we just downplay our story so much. I think that we downplay the value of our tales. And there was something that I said in another media thing, that 2016 Moana proved that our Pacific stories hold global value. And I'm not really settled at just having one Disney movie. I'm keen for us to be out there and telling our stories ongoing.
Yeah, mean.
Man, that's awesome. And speaking of stories, what's been sort of some of the nuggets you've had to kind of step outside of the box to discover as part of collecting these stories and rediscovering some of these stories?
Yeah, so we've got one show that's coming up. We're actually putting on a show at the Kiritakanoa Theatre, which is the Aotea Centre, and that show is about Maui. And so I was researching Maui, and it's this big nostalgia trip, because, growing up, we get told these stories, and then once you get to intermediate, you forget about them. And I'm like, man, there must be a reason why these stories have been passed down from generation to generation to generation, but now they've just been kind of put together as folktale, you know, fairy tales for the Pacific, but there must be greater stories. And so you dive into them and you dig into that Maui isn't just a Maori character, but there's traces of Maui throughout the Pacific. And it's like, man, this actually holds a little bit of weight. You go and do some research and you revisit the stories and you're like, man, we've had this gem in our back pocket since primary school, and we forget that we hold this. We forget that we own this. And it's kind of just, it's cool to be able to go and revisit a lot of things that you know, but you think that the whole world has it, but it's really just special. It's a special taonga for New Zealand and for the Pacific. Another kind of unraveling is really just understanding who we are. For me, I've grown up in the diaspora, so it's given me an opportunity to dive into my culture. It's given me an opportunity to go back to Samoa. It's given me an opportunity to go back to my whānau in Taranaki and dive into like what it means to be Samoan and Maori, and then hopefully go to our cast and go, if you're Tongan, like go and dive into your Tongan heritage, go and dive into your Hawaiian heritage, your Cook Island heritage, because there's gems in everything. But because we've grown up in the diaspora, maybe we haven't been afforded that opportunity to look there first. So, yeah. Again, another long answer, but
that's awesome.
Unraveling heaps of stuff, man.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And one of the things I was curious about, I know you did Moana.
Yes.
Moana program.
Yeah.
I did a snippet of it as part of my internship last year, and I thought it was amazing.
Cool.
But you would have done the full, was it a year?
I actually graduate next week.
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
Well,
wicked.
because of the lockdowns, everything's been pushed back. So yeah, I've done a year of Moana.
Man, that's
Yeah.
awesome. What's that experience been like for you, just to like help contextualize, you know, your own upbringing, you know, some of these experiences you've been exploring yourself?
It's come really timely, and I guess people who don't know what Moana is, there's this organization called Leadership New Zealand, and they work with developing the top leaders in New Zealand. And Moana is an offshoot from that was designed by Kalo, who is an amazing poet, Pacific poet. She is top tier, but she designed a Pacific version of Leadership New Zealand, and so they work with Pacific leaders to train them up in how to stand in mana in their Pacific in their Pacificness. And so I've a lot of my role models have gone through it in previous years, and they recommended me to do the last cohort. It's just been timely. It's been timely that as I'm coming into spaces of leadership and I guess stepping into the public eye and different things, that I am able to, you know, stand strong and be confident in my bloodline through the Pacific, you know, be able to call out bullshit when I see it, when there's systemic racism that comes our way, and be able to, just be able to speak on behalf of our people. Yeah, so it's been really timely, and I've made some really good connections with other Pacific leaders. There's some amazing Pacific people out there, man, and I'm honored to be on one of the people that have gone through that Moana program.
Yeah, man. How important is it, like for men in general, or Pacific men and Māori men? Like you said, you talked about the stories and capturing those stories and retelling those stories through dance and different mediums. How important is it for us as men? Because it seems like there's a bit of a reawakening. People are trying to figure out the history and diving into the history. How important is it for us as Pacific and Māori men to really kind of grasp the knowledge and the history of our roots? I think
that mainstream is understanding the value that our Indigenous people have had the whole time, and unfortunately that through colonization, you know, they've buried those gems. And I think it's important that we can access those gems whenever we want, because it's in our blood. However, we don't, especially other people like me who have grown up in the diaspora, they've grown up disconnected from their culture. It's important. It's so important to go and reconnect. The reason why, how do I say this? I was on a tour in Samoa in 2015, and they put me on the radio and they're like, oh, what village are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from Maluafo. Maluafo isn't a village. Maluafo is an area in town. But I always grew up thinking, being told Maluafo's where you're from, Maluafo's where you're from. And so the radio host was like, oh, no, what village are you from? Oh, Maluafo. No, what village are you from? And all I knew was what I've been told. And it made me realize that there's been such a disconnect throughout generations that none of my family actually knew where we were from. And so to be presented with this kind of challenge, to me, I saw it as a challenge. I have to find a way to connect back to my village, not just for me, but for my whole family, because we're going to get disconnected if this carries on from generation to generation. And so I came home and I told my dad, do you know that you're not from, like, our house is in Maluafo, but our village, we don't know where our village is. And so that dove into the whole Samoan side, and I told my mum, and she was like, yeah, well, you know, us Māoris know where we're from. We're from Ngāti Ruanui. And I was like, yeah, man, Ngāti Ruanui, all good. And then I look it up again. Mum, I don't think we're from Ngāti Ruanui. And it came that the iwi that we had been, you know, that we would whakapapa back to actually wasn't our iwi. But through the disconnect of space and the disconnect of time, and through our generations being really disconnected through our culture and our traditions, we've lost our identity. And so for me, I'm really on a path that is connect with your culture on both sides, not for me, but for my kids and for my family. And so my mum can be connected to her iwi and my dad can be connected to his village. Because if I don't do it, like I've been given a challenge, and if I put this challenge down, I don't know what generation's going to pick it up next. And so it's been a massive journey, man. And it's, you know, I understand that I hold a space as a Pacific leader, and then being a Pacific leader and then going and signing up to a beginner's language course and just being like, bro, you got to get the ego out because I have to start from the beginning just like everybody else, you know. But it's been a beautiful journey, man. It's been a beautiful journey trying to learn my language on both sides and trying to reconnect with my family on both sides, reconnect, I guess, redeem some past hurts, generational past hurts and generational trauma that's gone along, and try and fill in the gaps of these stories that get told from generation to generation of different things that have happened. It's been a trip. Yeah. It's been a trip.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think in terms of identity, you talk about identity and reliving or trying to rehashing the you know, our culture and so forth. And a lot of people don't know, okay, I'm Samoan, but I don't know, like you're saying, I don't know my village, I don't know how to speak Samoan, I don't know tangata whenua, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's quite important for us to kind of get back into our roots. Do you think it's you know, and I think you've heard it before, and I don't know, Jay, is it because there's a lot of issues that our young men are facing, even older men, that are happening in especially in our own communities? Do you think it's got to do with a lot of it? It's got to do with identity and the lack of identity and knowing who you are? Yeah. Because if you don't know your identity, you're going to latch onto things that look like you but aren't quite you. You know, and so we see, man, I've latched onto the hip hop culture. As a culture, I've latched onto the hip hop culture because it looks like me. They share very similar struggles to me. Their houses look like my houses. Their skin looks like my skin. But it's not quite me. You know, so it fits 80%, but it's that 10%, that 20% that doesn't quite fit, that I need to find that. And I can only find that in my blood. I can only find that in my DNA, through my family, through the stories that are told. As we get more generations removed to where we're from, it's harder to connect back to the land. I still haven't been able to connect to my village, which I've now learned is Sapapali'i, you know, and I want to be able to connect there so my family can reconnect, so that when I have kids, they can reconnect, you know, and that they don't have to just look for something that looks like them, but they can look for something that they have something that is them. And so I do see, sorry, that's such a long way around your question. No, I love it. It's awesome.
But what I see as a youth worker, I see I see kids who are disconnected from their culture. I see kids who are disconnected from their families, and I see kids who are just disconnected. You know, they don't know who they are. And so I'm going to do what I see other people that look like me do. And I'm going to shoot in the dark, and hopefully I find something. Unfortunately, more times than not, it ends up not fulfilling that void.
Wow,
Man. Yeah, I was actually going to touch on, there's been some recent issues with some ram raids and things like that, and I know you've sort of talked a little bit about that, but I was just curious for those who maybe haven't seen what you've shared on that, maybe just some of your thoughts. You've shared some of them already, but just any other thoughts you might have on that.
Yeah, it's ram raids have been happening for a long time. You know, it wasn't until the ram raids happened at the bottom of Queen Street at a very, very posh couple of shops that it became national news. You know, it wasn't until it was a posh mall that it's like, oh, now it's a problem. You know, the kids have been doing ram raids for years. Social media has played a massive part in the popularization of it. I think gang culture has done a big part in the popularization of it. But for me, I look at what I see on the ground. I see that young people have been locked in their houses for 2 years. I see that there's been a massive disconnect on soft skills and social growth, because every interaction is through Zoom. Every interaction's with a mask. Every interaction, and don't get me wrong, man. I'm not anti-vax or anything. I'm pro. I was doing the videos and everything, but I understand that there's gonna be residue that will come from decisions that have been made, and we're seeing that now. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is just getting further and further and further and further apart. I look at something that I said on the news was like, when I was growing up, the goal was always to like have a family, own your home, own your own house, you know, and live the dream. That dream's impossible. That dream is impossible now. You have to do some really, like, you have to be in the top 1% to be able to own your own home as a young person. And so what kind of hope does that instill to our generation of young people coming up? Why are we slogging away at school? Why are we doing all of this stuff why? There's no hope. There's no hope because the gap has gone so big. And so when I see young people going out and doing these ram raids, I get it. I get it because it's just moved the starting line so far back. We don't start at the same place. We're not starting this race at the same place. Our generation didn't start at the same place. Imagine what this generation's going through. And so I get it. But for me though, I was able to get through some really tough times growing up because of programs that focused on prevention instead of recovery. And so whether it's a dance crew or whether it's a sports team or whether it's an arts program, it's prevention. Because there's these positive methods of engagement that also have positive role models attached to it. But we keep on throwing money as a country. We keep on throwing money at recovery. We keep on throwing money at being the ambulance at the bottom of the hill. I think Butterbean on your podcast said the police car at the bottom of the hill. It's too true, man. And I was having a chat to the brother, and he was saying, like, you know, it's $100,000 to put a young person into jail. What if we were to flip that on its head and give $100,000 to families to really, you know, set themselves up so they don't end up in jail?
Damn. Wow. That's quite deep. And you're right. Those ram raids have been going on for some time now, and it seems like it's real massive now. It's been kind of amplified on the news, and and people are saying this and that, and there's a lot of different views around the ram raids, and it seems like it's always our people, our kids, our boys who are involved in it, and obviously some of the ram raids, they're just taking clothes and food. Yeah, they're not even taking the money. Yeah. And so, what are your thoughts? Because you said it's like, it seems like there's a bit of hopelessness for our young people. Where do we even start to try and change the mindset, or just our people in terms of how do we, or even our men, more so our men, like how do we as adults help our young men to really flip the script, like you were saying?
Yeah. If I knew the answers, then I'd be singing those answers from the mountaintops. For me, though, it's I can only speak of my experience. And when I grew up, you know, we grew up in Kelston, which is for West Auckland. It's a pretty tough area, you know, low decile, low socioeconomic community, but we knew how to celebrate. We knew how to celebrate success, you know, and we would strive for excellence, and we would celebrate the successes of the people around us, which gave us pride in our community. When there's pride in the community, there's ownership over the community. When there's ownership of the community, you're not going to ram raid your own community, you know? And so there was, for me, how do we instill pride? How do we give young people ownership over their communities? And how do we, as Pacific men, teach that it's okay to celebrate success, that it's okay to be successful, to be ambitious, to go for your goals, no matter how ambitious those goals are? How do we get into that conversation?
Man, that's so cool.
And it's actually like, from listening to your podcast, because I'm a big fan.
Hey, we're a big fan.
The conversation always goes back to our relationship as Pacific and Maori people with humility. That seems to be the ongoing trend, is that our relationship with humility, and maybe what we've been brought up with, has been a very warped idea of humility, that being humble isn't about downplaying your skills and downplaying your dreams. Being humble is understanding that we're all in this together. However, what if we're all winning together? You know, what if we're all doing great things together? I'm really not a fan of us, and I understand why, because we've been... systemic racism and colonization has put us into a space where we are the underdog. But I want to live in a world where Pacific people aren't the underdog, that we don't play that story anymore, but we're the ones leading the pack. We're not the charity case anymore, but we're the ones who are going out there, like that we have a Pacific Prime Minister, that we have a Pacific Mayor, that we have, and we've had a couple of candidates of Pacific Mayors on the show, but that we're having our Pacific men and women being in spaces of excellence that match how good we are on the rugby field. You know, there's so many spaces that aren't allowed for us. And so I'd really like to be in a world where we can have a conversation where we're no longer the charity case.
Nice. That's so good, man.
Man, that's awesome. So inspiring. Yeah, just really makes me think about, you know, you're talking about the sort of the gap between the haves and the have-nots, and that's something I'm really interested in terms of the impact on education and being able to bridge that gap. And I always just find it really fascinating about how, you know, you talked about ram raids have been happening for a while, but once they hit, you know, then that was where the line was drawn. It was like, it was fine before, but now they've gone too far. And so it's just fascinating to hear your perspective on identity and taking pride in the community. It's something I'm really blessed to stay in Otara and be able to witness some of that community pride taking place. So I just wanted to give props and second that to talk all that. That's awesome.
Cheers,
yeah, man, that's so cool. Because it is, because you're right. It seems to be a recurring theme in terms of humility. Hads, and so we were talking about it the other day, and you said it 100%. I agree. Imagine our communities with men, or even our nation of men who is like striving to do some great things, our Pacific and Maori men striving together and lifting each other up.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, and I think you did a dance routine about taupopi syndrome.
I did, yeah. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's about 20 kgs ago. No,
taupopi syndrome. But even of that, even though we kind of say we're humble, there's a humility there. But even when we try to put ourselves out there, heads, you know, we're trying to, I'm going to get out there and going to do my thing. That sometimes our people can be the worst in terms of enemies, in terms of dragging us down. And so I'm just wondering, has there ever been a time where our people have done that to you?
Yeah, yesterday. No. They still do it. It doesn't stop. Oh man, you know, we've, like you said before, like we've just launched a show called Pacifica. You know, we're going into rehearsals and we're in the Civic Theatre for 2 weeks, and you know, we get this great, like, oh, this is amazing. Then I always just look in the comment section. You learn really quickly. Don't look in the comment section. But I was like, I have a look, and then you see, who do you guys think they are? You know, ripping off our Pacific culture. And it's like, oh man, okay, yeah, we're back here again. And it's I look back to when we started with Sweet and Sour. I don't want to keep on going back to the glory days, but at that time, it was okay to dream that big because everybody around us was dreaming that big. We had people like the Loaki brothers and, you know, Paddy Van, the Seniola brothers, like people doing amazing things in rugby that were unashamedly like, I want to be the best in the world. We were at school with the Pacifics boys, who, again, showing our age, but, you know, a great band that wanted to go and change the world. Then we're a dance crew, and yeah, man, we want to be the world champions. And we could speak this language. Yo, you're going to be the best band in the world. We're going to be the best dance crew in the world. You guys are going to be All Blacks. You guys are going to be Kiwis. And it's not like tearing down, but like, bro, we're all in this together. We're all going to be great. We're all going to be the world champions in whatever craft that we choose. But because that conversation was so fluid, it happened because you don't have to deal with anything else. And I look around, you know, we're working in schools now and we're working in communities, and I don't see that conversation happening. I don't see that conversation where, bro, you want to be the best in the world? I believe in you. I back you because I want to be the best in the world here. I'd say like, I still kind of hold it in like, one of my dreams is to be up there with Walt Disney. Walt Disney had to start somewhere. Stan Lee had to start somewhere. George Lucas had to start somewhere. Why can't I start in New Zealand in a garage? People hear then like, oh, gee. I'm like, nah, bro, why can't I? Why is that such a taboo thing to think highly, to have ambition? Because if I can succeed, then we can all succeed. But it's until somebody actually succeeds that everybody's then on the bandwagon. Bro, everybody's on Taika's bandwagon. Yo, Taika's the man. Taika's the man. Yeah, but at what point did you start supporting him? Was it until he got Thor? Or were you supporting him when he was making like these little vampire short movies, you know? Which, bro, that's weird. You know, it's not until somebody actually cracks it until our community backs them. And so ideally that we can get into a space of changing that narrative. And I'm not sitting here thinking that I'm perfect, bro. I take part in the back talk as well. But I have to pull myself up. So the piece that you're talking about, yeah, we did in 2015, I think we did a piece for the Pacific Dance Festival called Tall Poppy. And the way that came out, I remember I was at a bar and I was talking to a friend, and again, man, for the bloody fifth time on this podcast, Paris Goebel had just posted that I can pick and choose what I want to do. I've got into a space in my career where I'm not having to do what I'm told, but I can do what I want. And I hated that. I was like, oh, why can't I do that? Oh, she shouldn't be able to do that. And I had to pull myself up in the middle of the bar. I had to pull myself up and go, how dare you? How dare you speak ill of this person who is doing the amazing things that you're speaking ill because you want to do what she's doing? That should be inspiration. And in that conversation, the self-conversation, it was like, man, I need to tell this story. I need to tell this story that us as a community, we've gotten so used to, it's just becoming the norm that we talk about each other. We have to pull it back. And so it's not something that I'm perfect with because I take part in it as well, but it's definitely something that's holding our people back from actually being great. You know, we look at mainstream and we look at Palangi stuff and we feed on us being the underdog, but we make ourselves the underdog a lot of the times because we keep pulling ourselves down.
This is crazy. It is crazy, and it's really sad because, you know, it's kind of like it goes hand in hand. There's the humility, and then there's also like tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah,
man.
Sorry. It's an interesting dynamic, eh? And it's funny how like being the underdog can create this competitive environment. Where it's like everyone wants to. For some reason, we get it in our heads that there's not enough for all of us to achieve success. Yeah, that success is only limited to first in, first serve kind of thing. And if someone gets there before us, then it irks us a bit. Yeah, and it sort of makes me think about how, you know, growing up, roasting in the family was just something we did, and then from that it sort of escalates to like we see other people doing stuff, trying to do stuff, and you know we shoot them down before they ever get a chance, and it's crazy how something we grow up with it. That's natural, and you know, it's just a joke. We pass it off however we want, but actually, someone's on the other end of those words, and it's kind of crazy the impact it can have on someone.
Yeah, and like I said, don't look in the comment section. When you do, like I've been on the receiving end of somebody just unleashing on the keyboard. You know, it lands somewhere. Everything you do lands somewhere, and so it's a rule that I live by. That if you're not willing to say it to their face, just don't say it. You know, if you're willing to say it to their face, all good, because there's instant repercussions, and you can have a conversation. But hiding behind anonymity and hiding behind the keyboard, it's not the right way. Yeah. And
I can imagine a lot of the emotional and mental pain and hurt. There's a lot of, you know, if you're not thick-skinned, and you stand up and you kind of share your opinion, and then someone says, "Oh man, this is wrong," and just ridicules you, it can really kill someone. And it's funny. It's funny that, like you're saying, Hads, I've learned now, especially with Mandates and the podcast, like just don't read the comments.
Don't read the comments.
Some of those comments can really rev you up, and say, man, some people can be real cutthroat. AJ, there's some real cutthroat comments out there, and so the saddest thing about it is that it's coming from our own people. Yeah, I think that's the most saddest thing, and in terms of, you know, instead of lifting each other up, there's a real fine line of, it's like it's almost to the point of like, we don't really want you to do that well. Like there's a cap. Yeah, this is cool. You're doing this. You're part of us. But if you go over that cap, it's like, oh no, you need to come back down. Yeah. And so, but that's why I commend the work you do. Hats. Thank you, bro. I love it. I know you said something along the lines of you wanting to see our people succeed. You wanting to follow their dreams and their goals. And so right now, in terms of you doing what you're doing in terms of the musical Pacifica, obviously is one of the amazing goal. How is that panning out? How is that, like, in terms of the choreography? How is that panning out for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it came to me at the end of last year that there was a director who had gone and collated 20 of the top Pacific songs to come through the New Zealand airwaves, and he basically collated it in a way that it told a story. And he's been trying to get this off the ground for years, you know, but COVID and other issues have stopped it, and so it's finally gotten into a space where that we can put a great cast behind it, put it up, and for me that would be, when we're talking about like ambition, for me that would be amazing. You know, to be in the Civic Theatre, that wasn't meant for us. That wasn't meant for our stories. This is amazing. And then the director goes, actually, my goal is that it's touring countries, that there's 3 different versions of it, touring countries at the same time, that it's on like a Cirque du Soleil kind of schedule. And I'm like, yo, yes, because that's bigger than what we ever thought. You know, it wasn't until Desire went to the World Hip Hop Championships all the way in LA that we thought, yes, man, we could do that. We're destined for that. And so for me, this is the same kind of thing. Our stories going out to the world, that we're telling Pacifica, not only at the Civic Theatre, but in Hong Kong, in Dubai, in New York, that we make it. Imagine if we make it to Broadway. Imagine a New Zealand Pacific show on Broadway. And why can't we imagine that? And so for me, there's a twofold thing, and hopefully my director doesn't kill me. There's a twofold thing. Number one, I want to see that happen, because it only takes one person. It took Sweet and Sour to win the gold medal for everybody else to come through and go, if they could do it, we can do it. And now New Zealand has countless gold medals. But if this Pacifica show can do it, then anyone can do it, you know? We can tell our Pacific stories all over the world. The other part is that I want to learn how this guy does it, because this guy's got experience doing this kind of stuff. So I want to learn how he does it. I want to learn the moves that he makes. I want to learn the connections that he has to make, and the strategic moves that he has to make. So then I can take my shows and do the same thing.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's
awesome to hear. Like it sounds like this guy can play somewhat of a mentor role, and you've mentioned mentors in the past. So it's I'm curious about not just the importance of mentors, but what do you think sort of are some of the key attributes that make a great mentor?
I've been really, really, really lucky to stand on the shoulders of giants. I've been really lucky to be able to be mentored and role modeled through some of the greatest in the creative scene and through the community development scene, people like yourself, people that I've looked up to, and it's like, okay, this is what they're doing. And if I was to go to your question, what are the attributes? The attributes are authenticity. The attributes are community, for me anyway, community driven. And I think even just those two, we find that really evident in our Pacific people, because we understand the real meaning of community. We understand the real meaning of authenticity. And so I look at, there's so many people that I look up to, and I've been blessed to be able to journey with these people, but those are the two things. There's a heart for community, and there's a heart, and there's an authentic heart behind it. More often than not, it's also that they understand the spiritual realm of it as well. I'm very big in the spiritual space, and the people that I look up to, often the pillar of spirituality is strong as well.
Awesome.
Man, awesome. Hey, obviously you understand the premise of Mandate is really about encouraging and supporting and inspiring men out there. I'm just wondering also, in terms of inspiration, where's it all come from? Obviously your faith is a big part, but I'm just curious about your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just the relationship with you and your dad. And
man, you know what? Not many people ask about my dad, but he's the man. He's the man. And it's actually really, my dad is, I didn't have much time with my dad growing up because he was working. And it's the story, we hear the story so much. My dad would wake up at 5 a.m. every day. He's out the door at 5:30, and then he's home at about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. By that time, too exhausted to do anything, straight to sleep. And so my dad, for me, was this figure that I knew worked his ass off so that I could have a better life. And even though I didn't get time with him, that set an example of what my vision of what a father should do. I'm saying this like he's not here. My dad is still here. Sorry, man. Oh, it's terrible. No, sorry. But growing up, that was my relationship with him, and so I didn't have much of a relationship with him. For me, it was, if dad had to speak to me, it was discipline. If dad had to speak to me, there was some adjustment that needed to be done, because if there was time that I had to spend with dad, it was taking it away from him providing. And so that started a really, and me and my dad are working through this now. At 35 years old, we're only just working through this now. That it started I had a view of my dad as being discipline. I had a view of my dad, it wasn't necessarily love. It was, this is what needs to be done. And then as he became a grandfather, it's like another person was kind of introduced, and he's all lovey-dovey and all of this stuff. I'm like, excuse me, where was that when I was growing up?
That's so true, man.
And so, like my wife has only known my dad as this lovey-dovey. Like, man, you're so lucky to have a dad like this. I was like, it's not the dad. I don't know who this man is. But my dad has actually, he's a carpenter, and he's a hard worker, and he taught me all of my work ethic. But now I'm seeing him transition into this God-fearing man who has a heart for the community. He gives up his Thursday nights to run a recovery group for men who are battling with addiction and trauma. He's coming to the end of his, working life. He's getting into retirement now and spending his days helping community. And I'm like, man, how lucky am I to have this guy as my dad? Because I'm not only, I've been blessed to be able to learn my work ethic, but now I'm blessed to be able to learn my heart. I look at him. This is tough because I haven't been man enough to tell him this to his face. So it's probably the first time he's going to hear it if he listens. I look at him now as my role model to how to be a husband, how to be a father, how to be a community leader, how to be a man when you strip away the bravado and the toxic masculinity of it, you know. And I'm just so lucky that I've able to have these 2 seasons of my father. So I really want to honor him, but not many people ask about my dad. So yeah, thank you.
All good, man. No, 'cause I can imagine that in terms of your character and your attributes, it has to come from somewhere. Obviously, your mum as well.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering, oh man, you must have an amazing dad.
Yeah.
And so you do. You have an amazing dad. Jay, you.
Nah, I feel like a lot of people can kind of relate to the dynamic with your father growing up versus them as a grandfather. Yeah, I can relate. So I just wanted to. Yeah. It's just funny how relatable it is.
so true. Where does this person come from? Like,
Yeah, I know, man.
It's changed, the imposter. Yeah, but you're right, man.
And you know what? Like it's actually been what we're struggling with is what I'm struggling with, and me and my dad are working through this together. Is that I don't know this person. I admire this person, but I don't know this person. This person isn't my dad. You know, this is a role model for me now. But man, I was like, man, I wish that this was the dad that I had growing up, but also I wouldn't trade the dad that I had for the world, because it taught me the work ethic. It taught me, like, you do what you need to do to provide. You do what you need to do to put shelter over your head and food on your table. And as much as I would wish I had this dad back then, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
It's cool, man.
Out of curiosity, how much of your dad now do you think he was always like that, but he was just so busy and tired he couldn't really bring that part of himself? Or do you think it's something he's learned along the way, life's lessons, and perhaps now it's take a different approach to it?
I think he has, how I said that he works with men in a recovery program, he went through the same recovery program. And so I think it took my dad to be in a space of having to learn a new skill. You only know what you see. And so he modeled his idea of fatherhood of his father. And the stories that I've heard, my grandfather was a tough man. My grandfather got kicked out of Samoa and came to New Zealand on a banana boat. And all of that hurt. All of that. We're not Samoans, we're Maoris now. You know, that kind of, don't learn Samoan. Do this, do that, do this. He was a bit of a stern father. My dad only knew how to be a father off the example that he was set. And so, again, I'm lucky that I have had 2 versions of my father that I can pick the best of both.
It's cool. Man, I can just imagine some of the pressures that we face as men. And so I wanted to ask you, in your observation as well, Hads, what do you think are some of the societal pressures that we as men are facing in this day and age? What do you see? What are your thoughts? It's
a tough. So I'm not a father, you know, I'm not a dad, and I understand that when that happens, there's a whole nother level, you know, and so I don't want to speak on behalf of all men, but I can only speak on what I've seen. There is a pressure to provide. There is a massive pressure to provide, and the landscape of how to provide has changed. Living costs have gone through the roof. Rent has gone through the roof. Food prices, everything's gone through the roof. And so our pressure to provide, it's getting tougher, you know. You then put on that for us as Pacific men, you know, we're the ones... We're overrepresented in the lower paying jobs. And so if our jobs, even if we're working our ass off from sun up to sundown, we're still not making that amount to provide, I can understand why people are turning to other things. Can understand why the gangs are so attractive right now. Can understand why crime is high. I can understand why drug use and alcohol abuse is high, because there's almost a need for an escape from the pressures of just trying to provide, you know, let alone enjoy life. And I think especially for us as Pacific people, ambition, you provide and then you're allowed to have ambition, but you provide first, which is great. Like, yeah, that's unfortunately though, the environment that we're in, providing is so tough. And again, I'm saying this as someone who's not a father. I'm saying, like, it's tough for me to provide just for me and my wife. I can't imagine the pressures that are on our young fathers. I can't imagine the pressures that are on our young people who are trying to climb the ladder of success, find a career, be a good partner, good husband, and raise kids. And then I'm coming here on a podcast going, oh, you should be ambitious. I understand it's not the reality for everybody. I wish I had a magic wand that could change that. But I think it's stuff that we need to be asking questions, not asking, demanding answers for at a government level. Because when we're talking about that, we don't have the same starting line in life as everybody else. That race doesn't get closer as we get older. If anything, the pressures become more and more worse.
Wow.
Far out.
Okay. Man.
Nah, deep. I just the race of life is just, yeah. When you put it into that perspective, it's kind of crazy to reflect on your own life and see the things you took as just normal. It's just part of life. But I think one of the things that amazes me the most about you is your self-awareness and being able to. Half the battle, I feel like, is just getting outside of your own head. You know, there's so many ambitions you have, but you tend to limit yourself out of fear that other people will shoot you down. So before you give them a chance, I feel like other men can relate. I'd like to think they can relate, but it's something, at least from my personal experience, I find myself shooting myself down because it'll save me the heartache of putting myself out there and being shot down by others. So yeah, I just wanted to comment on how do you find that self-awareness? Is it a journey? Was it a huge event? But how do you get out of your own thinking?
Yeah. Another thing that I've been really, really blessed with is that I have had 2 goes at this. And so my first kind of time in the spotlight was through Sweet and Sour. And that was kind of thrusted upon us. We didn't know what we were setting up to do. We just wanted to go and dance. We didn't realize that we would become an iconic figure and I know that might sound cocky, but it's, to a lot of people, that was their introduction, or that was like, Sweet and Sour's, it's a big thing for them. And so we got thrusted into that space. That came to an end. And then, I like I said earlier, I pretty much like, okay, that's my dancing done. And after a couple of years, I was given another opportunity to have ambition again. The beautiful part about going for a second time is that you can look back and go, what did I stuff up on the first time? And even though you're starting from scratch, and man, it's taken me 10 years. Like I said, with Sweet and Sour, we won the world championship in 1 year. It's taken me 10 years to rebuild somewhat of the success that we had back then. But it's being able to go to really look at myself in the mirror, look at some of the decisions that I made that first run, and realize that a lot of the stuff that held us down, a lot of the stuff that we tripped over was because of me. And so how do we do this again without me getting in the way? And so I've been blessed with a second time round. In saying that, it's been the hardest thing ever to have to rebuild and to have to, I go on things and people just want to hear about Sweet and Sour. I'm like, bro, I've been working on something else for 10 years. And it's kind of like, it's just being able to look back and go, what did I screw up the first time? And more often than not, the answer was, you screwed up. Yeah, you got power hungry. You wanted to be in the spotlight. You wanted to, and it's like, my ego's getting to me. But okay, so let's step out of the spotlight this time. Let's put young people in the spotlight.
Wow.
Yeah,
I can imagine that, because it might be quite, because you're part of Sweet and Sour and you're the CEO of this new dance crew, the freshman crew. And you're right. I think there's a time when you think, hey, my dash is done. Yeah, now it's time to hand over the mantle or the torch to the younger folks. And so I'm just wondering, how did you overcome some of those thoughts, and how did you come to a place where you said, I need to, those internal dilemmas. Yeah. How did you combat that, and how did you overcome some of those thoughts?
Bro, I don't know how I'm sitting here today. Because there were dark times. those sweet and sour days, as much as they were the greatest times of my life, they were the darkest times as well. It takes you to a place of, when you get thrusted into a space of global recognition, and you haven't, I was only the leader of Sweet and Sour because I was the oldest. There was no kind of plan that you are the leader, you know. It was just, oh, you're the oldest, then you're going to take care of all of this stuff. And so you're learning along the way. But with that comes a lot of dark times and a lot of just really confronting reflection points where you either run to it or you run away from it. And I'm lucky that I battled through and was able to stick out some of those really, really dark times. There was times that I didn't think that I would be around for the next day. There were times that I didn't think, you know, real massive struggles with mental health, real massive struggles with even suicide ideation, you know. And this is whilst trying to publicly be a Pacific leader and be out there and you know, represent the church and represent all of West Auckland and at that time working in South Auckland and trying to be a youth worker and all of this. But then deep down you're like, bro, you're a fraud, you know, you're just the inner talkings that come out. And so it's only by God's grace that I'm being able to have a second run, not just at the entertainment industry, but at life in general, that I'm still able to stand here. So going through that journey, I can now identify when other people are going through it, you know, and I can identify when young people come into our youth center and there's an aura about somebody that you know is like they're carrying a lot of stuff. And being able to sit with them and walk through that with them, or just give them the space and just be in space with them, you know, you can identify it because you've been through it yourself.
Yeah. And what are some practical stuff that you could help, like some examples that you've helped some of the young guys or even men in general heads? Listen. Yeah. You don't have to find the answers. No one's really coming to you for answers. You know, if somebody's going through a hard time, and just being there and just being quiet, being there and listening, being there and like just knowing that, like, okay, if you want to say anything to me, you can talk. But if you don't want to, let's just sit here. Nice. Taking time, holding space, and understanding that like it's not about you, it's about them. Yeah. Remove yourself from the situation and just be there to serve. Yeah, nice. Awesome.
Yeah. That's deep. The only thing that comes to mind for me, just a sort of contrast with that, you sort of talked about ambition, you've talked about really ambitious goals, things like touring the world and sort of bringing Walt Disney, that sort of big storytelling base for sort of Pacifica. Is there and you've talked about doing things twice. If there was a third chapter, maybe a sort of out there one, or do you have any ambitions that maybe aren't tied directly to your creative output, something really left field that you'd love to try one day?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one for me would be to be a dad, you know, and I know that when my season of fatherhood comes, and it will come, when my season of fatherhood comes, it will change everything. And I'll probably look back on this podcast going, bro, this guy's all shit. But for me, that is the third chapter. That is like me being the best two versions of the dad that I've been able to grow up to see. I know that when I become a father, that's going to be my life, you know. However, I've been able to work to a space where my method of providing is creativity, which is just like, I'm so lucky. I do not take my position for granted. I do not take my platform for granted. The way that I put bread and butter on the table is through creativity, is through creating shows, is through doing gigs and being able to come up with creative ideas. And so it's just been God kind of orchestrating the whole way that I don't have to give up one to do the other. That I get to provide for this one by doing this one, which is beautiful. Something that's far left field, man. I'd love to work for Marvel. I would love to. I actually, it's not really left field, but I don't have a qualification. I've no qualification I've dropped out of uni like 3 times. I don't have NCEA, and so I would really love to get a piece of paper behind me and do something on that side. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
What do you mean by Marvel? You mean like directing one of the Marvel?
Yeah, why not,
movies? Yeah,
why
nice.
not, bro? Like, that would be dope. Like, surely in the Marvel universe, there's a Samoan superhero somewhere, or if not, bro, let's create one.
There is one. I think there is a Samoan superhero. I forgot his name, but there is one. But I'll look it up for you. There's one.
You know, I like companies that dream big, and so I look at the Disneys and I look at the Marvels. I'm a massive fan of WWE. Like, I think like there's these big entertainment entities that I'm like, bro, I want to work for you because I want to learn how you do it and then do it in New Zealand. I want to learn how you do it and then do it in Kelston, do it in Otara, do it in Papatoetoe, you know, because we're allowed to have those conversations as well.
Bro, that's awesome. And I totally get what you're saying. I think you said earlier on about ownership. And imagine if our Pacific people and our Maori people were just able to own some of these entities and just
hard.
Amazing. Oh man, just so many gold nuggets, so many gold nuggets also, man. Any last words, Jay? You want to share or any other questions? Or?
Just thank you for the time, for the honesty and authenticity which you talked about. Excuse me. Just really grateful for sharing the journey, and it's awesome for us, for me and my brother, because we loved watching SAS, and I remember you guys were on America's Best Dance Crew. There was a special that you guys did, and we were just like, man, even now, like before I came, my wife was like, hey, remember the mix from the year? So like, honestly, there's a generation of us that are like, you know, you got served, you mentioned.
Yeah.
So just throwbacks, and so it's awesome to meet the man behind it, but also just to see the growth and the struggle. I think it's really important to acknowledge the struggle. So I'm really glad you're able to shed some light on that. And so thank you so much for the wisdom and the nuggets, man. It's been an honor. So yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Oh man, Hads, thank you so much also.
All good.
It's been good to catch up again and see what you're doing, and obviously hear what you're doing. And just I think it was last week or the week before about Pacifica, the musical. I said, man, that guy is still going. He's still doing some amazing things. And it's amazing that you're accomplishing amazing feats, but also just continuing. And so for you, Hads, just one more question.
Yeah, all good.
In terms of all the success and all the great things you've done, which one out of all that accomplishment, which one has been the highlight for you? The one that's the number one, like, man, that's just been amazing.
Bro, it's hard, It's hard. The world championships and all of that, that's really cool. Touring is really cool. But I tell you what, and I know this might not be the biggest thing for people, but every month I get to pay dancers.
No.
You know, every month I put money into dancers' accounts, and that was impossible 15 years ago. Dancing was a hobby that you gave up when you became an adult, and now we've got a whole bunch of dancers who are getting paid to do what they do. They put bread and butter on the table from dancing. Man. And so for me to be able to do that, and I mean, we're only at the first step. We want to get to a space where dancing, New Zealand's the best in the world at dancing. So how come we don't have the salaries of the All Blacks, who are also the best in the world at what they're doing, depending on the season?
True.
But how come we can't, you know? And so again, that might be just the ambition coming out, but I've gone around the world and seen people from the bottom of the world to the top of the world fall in love with New Zealand dancing. So why is it still that we can go and travel the world, come back and then go and work at BP? You know, we go and travel the world, come back and go and work at JJ's. Go and we're doing these other jobs. This should be your job. You should be contracted just like a professional athlete. And so when you say what is your biggest, at the moment for me, is that payday is when we can go and put money, good money too, into dancers' pockets, young dancers' pockets. I want to, when a young person's coming up through high school and they go to the careers person and they say, I want to be a dancer, I don't want the careers person to laugh and say, nah, you have to come up with a real job. I want this to be a real job. And so to be able to do that for the people that I do it for, that's a massive kind of accomplishment for me.
Bro, that's so powerful. So, man, thank you so much. Been a real blessing, Us. And hey, just before we ask you one last thing, because is there anyone ideal that you could think of that could be be a good person to come on the podcast?
Yeah, man. Yeah, there's, when I say like I stand on the shoulders of giants, there is Hadleigh Pouesi. Hadleigh Pouesi is the godfather of New Zealand youth work. I don't care what anyone says. He's the godfather. He's the one who started it. And I have to shout out to the brothers no longer with us, but Alan Va'a as well. Alan, BP, the greatest youth worker that New Zealand's ever seen. But definitely Hadleigh needs to be here. Rob Luisi from out west, he needs to be here. And then there's a couple of dancers or creatives that I think are the GOATs. Justin Hayu and Alistair Ngawati Salaivao. Those guys are,
man,
they should be here.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that. And as always, we always have a gift for our guests.
Oh, bro.
And so, Hads, hey, this is from this is from the Mandate team.
Yo.
It's for you.
Oh, thank you, bro.
So much.
Oh, brother, the rumors are true. I hear it on your podcast, but you made me look skinny. Thank you.
Hey, man. Listen, you.
Thank you, brother.
Back in the days, but hey, thank you so much. But any last words, Hads? You want words of encouragement for our men out there?
Yeah, man. Don't be afraid to dream big. Don't be afraid to dream big. I understand the pressures that society put on us. I understand the pressures that we are born into. But if you dream big, we all rise together.
Yeah. Awesome. And please like, subscribe, and please comment. Be cool to hear your comments. But as always, Jay, our mantra.
Our mantra is refine,
unlock,
and take charge.
Mandate.